There's something about certain connections between two people that most can't explain, but that Carl Jung discovered to be much deeper than physical attraction or emotional compatibility. He called this the soul connection, a psychological bond so powerful that it transcends time, distance, and even the rational reasons that should keep two people apart. If you've ever experienced someone who seems to pull you back into their orbit no matter how many times you try to move on, someone whose presence feels like coming home even when the relationship is complicated or impossible, someone who understands parts of you that you've never shared with anyone else, then you need to understand what Jung discovered about these profound soul connections and why they create such an irresistible magnetic pull. Jung realized that these aren't random attractions or simple infatuations. They're what he called encounters with the anima or animus, the unconscious masculine or feminine aspects of our psyche that we project onto certain individuals who carry the psychological qualities we're meant to integrate within ourselves. When you meet someone who triggers this soul recognition, you're not just attracted to them as a person. You're encountering a mirror of your own unconscious potential, a living representation of the psychological wholeness you're seeking to achieve. This is why the connection feels so intense, so meaningful, so impossible to forget or replace. Jung understood that the psyche is constantly seeking completion, wholeness, what he called individuation. And sometimes this process manifests through powerful attractions to people who embody the missing pieces of our psychological puzzle. They become carriers of our unlived life, representatives of the aspects of ourselves we haven't yet developed or integrated. But here's what makes these connections so compelling and often confusing. The person you're drawn to isn't actually completing you. They're reflecting back to you the parts of yourself that are seeking integration. The magnetic pull you feel isn't really about them. It's about your soul's recognition of its own potential for wholeness. This is why he always comes back, and why you find it so difficult to truly let go. The connection isn't based on compatibility or shared interests, or even love in the conventional sense. It's based on what Jung called archetypal resonance, a deep psychological recognition that operates below the level of conscious awareness. Think about the person who keeps returning to your life despite all logical reasons why the relationship shouldn't work. Jung would tell you that this person has become a carrier of what he called your contrasexual archetype, the unconscious masculine or feminine energy that seeks expression through your psychological development. For women, this often manifests as an intense connection to a man who embodies their animus, their inner masculine qualities of strength, direction, intellectual clarity, or spiritual purpose. For men, it often appears as a powerful attraction to a woman who carries their anima, their inner feminine qualities of intuition, emotional depth, creativity, or relational wisdom. But Jung discovered something crucial about these projections. The intensity of the attraction is directly proportional to how unconscious these qualities remain within yourself. The more you haven't developed your own inner masculine or feminine potential, the more powerfully you'll be drawn to someone who seems to embody those qualities. This creates what Jung called the projection cycle. You're magnetically attracted to someone because they carry qualities your psyche recognizes as essential for your wholeness. But because these qualities remain unconscious within you, you experience them as existing only in the other person. This makes them seem irreplaceable, uniquely special, the only one who can make you feel complete. And this is exactly why he keeps coming back. Not because you're meant to be together in the conventional romantic sense, but because the psychological work this connection represents isn't finished. Your psyche won't let go of this person until you've integrated the qualities they represent within yourself. Jung realized that these soul connections serve a specific evolutionary purpose. They're the psyche's way of drawing your attention to aspects of yourself that need development. The intensity of the attraction is proportional to the importance of the psychological growth this person represents for your individuation process. But here's where most people get trapped in these connections. Instead of recognizing the person as a mirror for their own potential development, they become dependent on the external relationship to feel whole. They chase the person rather than developing the qualities the person represents within themselves. This creates a cycle of dependency and return that can last for years or even decades. You feel incomplete without this person because they carry projections of your own unlived potential. You try to move on, but nothing else feels as meaningful because other relationships don't trigger the same archetypal resonance. Eventually, you or they reach out again because the psychological pull remains unresolved. Jung found that these connections often involve what he called synchronistic events, meaningful coincidences that seem to bring two people together repeatedly despite practical obstacles or rational decisions to stay apart. You might run into each other in unexpected places, receive messages from them just when you were thinking about them, or find that major life changes somehow bring you back into each other's orbit. These synchronicities aren't random or coincidental. They're manifestations of what Jung called the transcendent function, the psyche's natural tendency to create circumstances that facilitate psychological growth and integration. Your unconscious and theirs are collaborating to maintain the connection until the psychological work it represents is complete. But Jung was very clear about something important. These soul connections aren't necessarily meant to result in successful romantic relationships. Often they're too intense, too archetypal, too loaded with unconscious projections to function well as practical partnerships. The person who triggers your deepest soul recognition might not be compatible with your everyday life, your long-term goals, or even your conscious values and preferences. This is why these connections often feel both inevitable and impossible, both deeply meaningful and practically unworkable. You're trying to make a relationship work on the level of ego and daily life when its real purpose exists on the level of soul and psychological development. Jung discovered that the intensity of these connections often diminishes significantly once you begin to integrate the qualities the other person represents within yourself. As you develop your own inner masculine or feminine potential, as you become more psychologically whole and complete, the projection onto the other person naturally begins to withdraw. This doesn't mean the love or appreciation disappears. It means the desperate, magnetic, can't live without them quality of the attraction transforms into something more balanced and sustainable. You can love and appreciate this person without needing them to feel complete. But this integration process requires conscious work. You can't just wait for the projections to withdraw naturally. You need to actively engage with developing the qualities this person represents within your own psychological development. If you're a woman intensely drawn to a man who embodies strength, leadership, or intellectual clarity, Jung would encourage you to develop these qualities within yourself. If you're a man powerfully attracted to a woman who represents emotional depth, intuitive wisdom, or creative expression, the path forward involves cultivating these capacities in your own inner development. This doesn't mean becoming like the other person or losing your own authentic nature. It means becoming more complete, more whole, more fully yourself by integrating the archetypal energies this person has been carrying for you. Before I share the specific techniques Jung developed for working with these soul connections consciously and transforming them into vehicles for genuine psychological growth, I need you to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because what I'm about to reveal in the second part could fundamentally change how you understand not just this relationship, but all your future connections and your own path to psychological wholeness. Because Jung didn't just identify these soul connections as psychological phenomena. He developed practical methods for working with them that can transform obsessive attractions into genuine psychological development, that can help you reclaim the projections that keep you dependent on specific individuals, and that can guide you toward the kind of inner completion that makes all your relationships more authentic and fulfilling. Jung found that when people learn to work with these connections consciously, something remarkable happens. The desperate seeking for the other person transforms into grateful recognition of the growth they've facilitated. The magnetic pull becomes a bridge to your own psychological development rather than a trap that keeps you cycling through the same patterns. And most importantly, Jung discovered that as you become more psychologically complete through this inner work, you naturally become capable of much deeper and more authentic connections with others. Not because you need them to feel whole, but because you have wholeness to offer and share. Think about how different your relationships would be if you came to them from a place of psychological completeness rather than unconscious seeking. If you were attracted to people because of genuine compatibility and shared growth rather than because they carry projections of your unlived potential. Jung realized that most relationship problems stem from unconscious projections, from expecting others to provide psychological qualities that we haven't developed within ourselves. When these projections are withdrawn and the qualities are integrated internally, relationships become much more honest, sustainable, and mutually enriching. But Jung also understood that this process of projection withdrawal can be challenging and even painful. When you stop needing someone to carry your inner masculine or feminine potential, the relationship often changes dramatically. Sometimes it becomes much deeper and more authentic. Sometimes it naturally dissolves as the psychological purpose it served is completed. This is why many people resist doing this inner work. They're afraid that integrating these projections will mean losing the connection to this special person. But Jung discovered the opposite. When you reclaim your projections and develop psychological wholeness, you become capable of loving this person and others much more authentically and sustainably. The magnetic pull doesn't disappear because you no longer need it for completion, but it transforms into something much healthier, a recognition and appreciation of this person's actual qualities rather than a desperate dependence on what they represent for your psychological development. Now, I want to share with you the most transformative discovery Jung made about these soul connections, something that will fundamentally change how you understand not just why he keeps coming back, but how to transform this magnetic pull into genuine psychological freedom and authentic love. Jung realized that the person who triggers your deepest soul recognition is actually what he called a psychological catalyst, someone whose primary function in your life is to activate your individuation process. They're not meant to complete you externally. They're meant to awaken the completion that already exists within you but hasn't yet been developed. This is why the connection feels so profound and why it's so difficult to replicate with anyone else. This person has unknowingly agreed to carry some of your most important psychological potential until you're ready to reclaim it and integrate it within yourself. They've become a living repository of your unlived life, your undeveloped capacities, your unrealized psychological wholeness. But here's what Jung discovered that changes everything about how you approach these connections. The intensity of your attraction to this person is actually a measure of your own psychological potential. The stronger the pull, the more significant the development that awaits you. The more irreplaceable they seem, the more essential qualities they're carrying that belong within your own psychological structure. Jung developed specific techniques for what he called withdrawing projections and reclaiming soul fragments. These aren't just therapeutic exercises. They're alchemical processes that transform unconscious dependence into conscious wholeness, that turn obsessive attraction into psychological gold. The first technique Jung developed is what he called projection dialogue. Instead of trying to suppress your feelings for this person or forcing yourself to forget them, you engage in conscious dialogue with what they represent. You ask yourself specific questions about what qualities you see in them that seem so essential, so irreplaceable, so uniquely attractive. Do you see them as exceptionally strong, confident, or decisive? Jung would help you recognize that your soul is calling you to develop these qualities within yourself. Do you perceive them as unusually intuitive, creative, or emotionally deep? Your psyche is showing you aspects of your own potential that are seeking expression. The key insight Jung discovered is that we're never attracted to qualities that don't already exist within our own psychological potential. We can only recognize and be drawn to what already exists, at least in seed form, within our own psychic structure. This person is simply providing a clear external representation of your own inner capacities. The second technique Jung developed is what he called active imagination with the internal figure. You learn to have conscious conversations with the inner masculine or feminine figure that this person represents within your own psyche. You discover that you can access the strength, wisdom, creativity, or other qualities you've been seeking from them by developing relationship with these archetypal energies within yourself. This isn't about replacing the external person with an internal fantasy. It's about recognizing that the qualities you've been seeking from them actually exist within your own psychological structure and can be developed through conscious inner work. Jung found that when people practice this consistently, something remarkable happens. They begin to embody the very qualities they were seeking from the other person. Women who were attracted to strong, decisive men begin to develop their own inner authority and clarity. Men who were drawn to emotionally deep, intuitive women begin to access their own feeling wisdom and creative inspiration. As this integration happens, the desperate quality of the attraction naturally transforms. You still appreciate this person and the role they've played in your development, but you no longer need them to feel complete. The magnetic pull becomes gratitude rather than dependency. But Jung discovered something even more profound about this process. He found that as you integrate these projected qualities, you often develop what he called authentic spiritual connection with the person who carried them. Instead of the relationship being based on unconscious need and projection, it can become based on genuine recognition and appreciation. Sometimes this leads to much deeper and more sustainable romantic relationships, freed from the desperate quality that often sabotages these intense connections. Sometimes it leads to profound friendships or spiritual partnerships that can last a lifetime. Sometimes it leads to grateful completion and natural separation, with both people free to pursue connections based on authentic compatibility rather than unconscious projection. The third technique Jung developed is what he called conscious relationship with the archetypal level. You learn to recognize when you're relating to this person as a carrier of archetypal energy, versus relating to them as an individual human being with their own needs, limitations, and life path. When you're projecting archetypal energy onto someone, you're not really seeing them clearly. You're seeing them through the lens of what you need them to represent for your psychological development. This creates unrealistic expectations and often leads to disappointment when they inevitably fail to live up to their archetypal image. Jung found that withdrawing these archetypal projections allows you to see and appreciate this person much more clearly and authentically. You can recognize their actual strengths and limitations, their real personality and preferences, their genuine compatibility or incompatibility with your life circumstances. This often reveals that the person you thought you couldn't live without is actually quite different from the archetypal figure you were projecting onto them. Sometimes this leads to discovering genuine compatibility and shared interests that can support a real relationship. Sometimes it reveals fundamental incompatibilities that explain why the relationship has been so difficult despite the intense attraction. But Jung emphasized that both outcomes are positive because they're based on psychological truth rather than unconscious projection. Whether the relationship deepens or naturally dissolves, you're now operating from a place of clarity and authenticity rather than compulsion and dependency. The fourth technique Jung developed is what he called integration through creative expression. You learn to express the qualities you've been projecting onto this person through your own creative work, spiritual practice, or life choices. If you've been attracted to someone's artistic creativity, you begin developing your own creative expression. If you've been drawn to their spiritual depth, you cultivate your own spiritual practice. If you've been fascinated by their intellectual clarity, you develop your own thinking and analytical capacities. Jung discovered that this creative integration is often the most powerful way to reclaim projections because it gives the archetypal energies concrete channels for expression in your actual life. Instead of the qualities remaining abstract ideals represented by another person, they become living aspects of your own personality and capabilities. As you develop these capacities within yourself, the need to seek them from others naturally diminishes. You become a source of the qualities you were seeking rather than someone who depends on others to provide them. But Jung made another crucial discovery about this integration process. He found that it often activates what he called the law of psychological compensation. As you become more psychologically complete, you naturally attract people who are also working toward wholeness rather than people who are carrying your unconscious projections. This means that as you do this inner work, your relationships naturally become more balanced, more mutually supportive, and more based on genuine choice rather than unconscious compulsion. You stop attracting and being attracted to people who represent your psychological work and start connecting with people who complement your developed wholeness. Jung also discovered that this process often resolves the question of whether you're meant to be with this specific person. As you become more psychologically complete, the answer becomes clear. Not through analysis or decision-making, but through natural attraction or lack thereof, based on genuine compatibility. If you're meant to be together, the relationship often becomes much easier and more sustainable once the projections are withdrawn. If you're not compatible beyond the archetypal attraction, the pull naturally diminishes as you integrate the qualities they were carrying for you. Either way, you're free from the compulsive quality that often makes these connections feel both irresistible and impossible. You can make conscious choices about relationships based on authentic compatibility, shared values, and mutual support for each other's continued growth. Jung found that people who complete this integration process often describe feeling like they've gotten their soul back. They no longer feel incomplete without specific individuals because they've reclaimed the soul fragments that were being carried by others. They become whole unto themselves, capable of offering genuine love rather than unconscious need. And this wholeness naturally attracts others who are also psychologically integrated. Instead of relationships based on mutual projection and dependency, you begin forming connections based on mutual appreciation and support for each other's authentic development. But Jung emphasized that this process requires patience and commitment. Withdrawing projections and integrating archetypal energies doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that requires consistent inner work, honest self-reflection, and willingness to take responsibility for your own psychological completion. The person who triggers your soul recognition will likely continue to have a special place in your awareness throughout this process. But the desperate magnetic quality of the attraction will gradually transform into something much more peaceful and sustainable. Jung discovered that many people resist this integration because they're afraid of losing the intensity and meaning that these connections provide. But he found that reclaiming your projections doesn't diminish the love or significance of these relationships. It transforms them into something much more authentic and ultimately more satisfying. Instead of seeking completion through others, you become someone who offers completeness. Instead of being at the mercy of unconscious attractions, you develop the capacity for conscious choice in relationships. Instead of cycling through patterns of magnetic attraction and inevitable disappointment, you become capable of sustainable love based on genuine compatibility and mutual growth. If you've recognized yourself in this exploration of soul connections and want to understand how to work with these powerful attractions consciously, I want you to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications for more insights that can help you transform unconscious patterns into conscious development. Share this video with others who might be struggling with intense, complicated relationships that seem both meaningful and impossible. Sometimes the most powerful healing happens when we understand that these connections serve a larger purpose in our psychological development. And leave a comment sharing your own experience with soul connections. Have you experienced someone who keeps coming back into your life despite practical obstacles? What qualities do you see in them that seem so essential and irreplaceable? How might you begin developing these qualities within yourself? Because Jung's ultimate message about soul connections is this: the person who triggers your deepest recognition isn't meant to complete you. They're meant to awaken the completion that already exists within you. The magnetic pull you feel isn't really about them. It's about your soul calling you home to your own psychological wholeness. Stop seeking your completion in others and start reclaiming the soul fragments they've been carrying for you. The love you're seeking from them already exists within your own capacity for wholeness. When you find it there, all your relationships become more authentic, more sustainable, and more deeply satisfying than anything based on unconscious projection could ever be.